There's a letter tucked beneath lavender-scented stationery in the bottom drawer of an old oak desk. The edges have curled with time, like fingers reluctant to let go. And though the ink hasn't faded, the words were never spoken. This is the last letter I never sent. And this is the story behind it. It was one of those slow, golden evenings in late September when the sky carries the weight of summer's goodbye. The city outside moved gently. Street lamps flickered on like cautious thoughts, and the hum of distant voices softened into lullabies. I was alone in my apartment, the one you never visited but somehow haunted anyway. I remember lighting a single candle. Not for the light but for the company. You always liked the smell of wax melting into air. You said it reminded you of something old and romantic, like ink stains on your fingers or love letters wrapped in ribbon. I never told you, but I started writing them. After you left. Not to be mailed. Not to be read. Just to keep you close in a way that didn't ache so much. That evening, I opened the drawer where I'd hidden them all. And on top was the last one. Unfinished, unsealed, and yet heavier than the rest. I touched the paper like it was your hand, half afraid it would pull me backward in time. And slowly, I began to read the words I once wrote but never dared to send. Tomorrow night I'll tell you what it said. Sometimes love lives not in what we say, but in what we never find the courage to finish. And in the drawer where I kept you, the last letter waited, still aching to be heard. The page was creased, folded once, then again. My handwriting wavered near the bottom, stopping mid-sentence, as if I'd run out of breath or belief. Dear Elliot, your name alone had always been enough to steady me. But that night, it quivered like a candle in wind. I had started the letter on a Tuesday. You would have smiled at that. I always said Tuesdays felt like the loneliest day of the week. And maybe that's why I tried to write to you, to fill the hollowness with something warm. Even if it was just memory. I saw a man on the train today who had your coat. The same scuffed buttons, the frayed pocket near the sleeve. He smiled the way you did when you were hiding a secret, like love itself was a language he didn't quite know how to speak. I remember pausing there, pen hovering over the paper. What came next? Was I going to say I missed you? That the echo of your laugh still lingered in my kitchen like steam from tea? That I'd spent too long pretending I hadn't memorized your absence? I never finished. Couldn't. Not then. But tonight, think I will. Even if you're no longer waiting for my words. Some part of me still is. Love doesn't always end with a door closing or a final goodbye. Sometimes it fades in quiet places, between train rides, under umbrellas, in the pauses of conversations never finished. Tonight I remember where the rain began. It was autumn in Prague when we first met. Not the postcard kind with orange trees and cobblestone cheer. No, this was the kind of autumn that smelled like ink and iron, where the wind carried secrets and leaves whispered stories down narrow alleyways. You were sitting by the river, sketching. Your hands stained with charcoal, your scarf caught in the breeze. You didn't see me right away, but when you did, it was like I'd been pulled into the middle of a poem I hadn't known I'd started writing. We spent the week like lovers from a forgotten novel. You told me about the house with a blue door where you grew up, how your mother made tea strong enough to stand a spoon in. I told you about my fear of endings, how I never finished books I loved too much, because closing the last page felt like a kind of death. You smiled. You're a story person, you said. And I think you're going to write me into one someday. And I did. I just never expected you to become the letter I could never send. The memory of your voice still lives in my chest like a pressed flower. Fragile, preserved, and waiting to bloom again when the right words return. Some goodbyes don't echo. They settle gently like dusk behind the eyes. Too quiet to stop, too tender to forget. Tonight, I return to the silence where we parted. You were leaving for Vienna. I remember the shape of your suitcase more than I remember your face that morning. It stood by the door like an ellipsis, waiting, unfinished, expectant. Neither of us said what we wanted to say. You wrapped your scarf twice around your neck, the same one I'd once borrowed and never returned. You smiled, just enough to hurt, and looked down at your boots like they held the answer to a question neither of us had dared ask. "Will you write to me?" finally whispered. "Will you read it if I do?" you said. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say please. I wanted to ask you to stay. Not forever, just long enough for one more cup of tea, one more night of sleeping shoulder to shoulder beneath the lullaby of trains. But I didn't. I watched the door close behind you with the slow ache of someone who just turned the last page of a story they hadn't finished reading. And so, the letter never made it to Vienna. Because by the time I wrote it, you were no longer mine to send it to. Even now, the words sit like dew on morning glass, fleeting, delicate, trembling with the softness of something never spoken aloud. But there is one part of the letter I still haven't read. Love lingers. Not in the grand gestures or the loud declarations, but in the lines we leave behind. Unfinished, folded, waiting. Tonight I open the letter. The one I never sent. The one you never received. It was buried beneath a book of poems, pressed like a dried rose, sealed in the scent of another time. My fingers hesitated before unfolding it, the way one touches something sacred. And there it was. My handwriting softer than I remembered. A voice I'd nearly forgotten. And yet, it felt like I'd just written it yesterday. Dear Elliot, I saw a man on the train today who had your coat. The sentence stopped. But now, in the quiet of this night, I finish it. And for a moment I let myself believe it was you. That you'd changed your mind. That you were on your way back, carrying the taste of Prague on your lips, looking for me, still loving me. I never said it, Elliot. Not when I should have, not when it could have saved us. But I loved you. Quietly. Fiercely. In every unspoken moment and in every unfinished word. You were my favorite almost. And if love lives in the space between two people who once understood each other without needing to speak, then maybe you still carry a piece of me too. This is the last letter I'll never send. But maybe you've already read it. Somewhere in the spaces between your dreams. I fold the letter gently, not to hide it, but to honor it. Because some love stories don't need endings. They simply rest. In hearts that once beat in time.